Hi, welcome. My name is Karla Centeno, and I'm the Director of Education and Engagement here at the Museum of Contemporary Art San Diego. My job entails connecting folks to art, so that means interpreting artwork through the development of tours, public programs, workshops for all ages. A lot of our work takes place here on site at our beautiful La Jolla location, but we also have a location down in downtown San Diego. And we also work out in the community. So a lot of the work that we do is bringing art to folks throughout the San Diego County. And yeah, so that's a little bit about me and what I do. So right now I'm standing in front of the first iteration of the Museum of Contemporary Art. This is a building designed by modern architect Irwin, who actually is pretty well known here in San Diego. He did a lot of beautiful buildings in Southern California. This building was made for Ellen Browning Scripps, who was a philanthropist and journalist who resided in San Diego in her later life. And this building was created in 1916. At some point, she passed away. This building went to a hospital. And in the 1940s, a group of La Jollans, which are people who reside here in La Jolla, went to the hospital and asked them if they can utilize the space to do pop-up art shows. So in the 1940s, the space, which was previously a home, had a lot of activations, a lot of pop-up art by artists. And then in 1941, they purchased this building for $10,000. We are 1 block away from the Pacific Ocean, so it's a quite stunning location. So this building, once it was acquired in 1941, it became the Art Center of La Jolla. And then in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, it underwent a few renovations by Mosher and Drew architects. And we also added our sculpture garden, which is right down below, and hopefully we'll get a few shots of that. And then in 1971, we became the La Jolla Museum of Contemporary Art. So we added the contemporary to our title. And that really shifted our focus to become a museum that shows artwork of our times. And since the 1980s, our collection has expanded greatly. We have 5,600 works in our collection. And we're about to check out the 1996 renovation, which was kind of the next iteration of our museum. So the museum consists of 3 different iterations. This is the first one, which includes office space. Right above there, you'll see that. And then it also includes a few gallery spaces. Axline Court, which is part of a 1996 renovation by architects Venturi and Scott Architects. What we see here is a postmodern approach to architecture. So the Irvin Gill architecture is very minimal. It was definitely a reaction against the very ornate architecture that was occurring in the 1920s and with Art Deco. But here we have architects that are moving away from a very minimalist modern take on art and adding a little bit more decoration and detail. In this case, the architect included this architectural feature, which obviously has skylights. It has some lights going through it, and a very beautiful organic design. And then what you are seeing here, this is a space that is free to the public, as well as their sculpture garden. And it's a space that we activate through different programs. And in this case, what you're seeing on these walls, which is still under development, is a student art show, which will open tonight and will stay up until Sunday. So this is really our space to invite folks in, to provide an accessible space to enjoy art. In addition to the student artwork, we also have artworks by other artists. So it's and of course this beautiful feature. So it's a really wonderful space for free. Everything from this point forward, and you can see the difference right here on the floor, is part of our new renovated space. In 2015, Seldom Architects began a huge redesign of our space. This space really allows us to show art in a way that we haven't been able to before. And as I mentioned, we have 5,600 works in our collection, so we have a lot of work to show, and this allows us the room to do that. The architect was very mindful of creating a language between the three buildings, so really taking into consideration the first iteration, the second, and now this one. And a lot of the architecture includes windows to bring the outside in, to position us within La Jolla, which is the community that we are in. Back in the day, the entrance used to be on the side of the building, which felt kind of awkward. So this new space then centers us right in Silverado and Prospect and brings, you know, the entrance to the middle of that crossroad. The architect added a lot of windows, and this kind of draws our attention to the different flora and fauna that's in this beautiful property. I get a lot of questions about this tree, and unfortunately I do not know much about it, other than it's been here for about 100 years, and it's very beautiful, and I love how it grows right here. It has this very interesting growth that I think happened at some point in its life. So we are about to enter what used to be Sherwood Auditorium. Sherwood Auditorium was a very beautiful space that was lined in, I believe it was oak, and it was a performance space that we underutilized. So when we spoke to the architects about how this space could change, we realized, you know what, we're gonna shift the model, and instead of using it as a performing arts space, we're going to use it as a gallery space. This space here is a space that will always have special exhibitions, so it's works that are not necessarily part of our collection, but works that rotate out every 3 to 6 months, and works that come to us from different places around the world. So right now we are in what used to be Sherwood Auditorium. We currently have an exhibition by an artist named Alexis Smith, who's an LA-based artist. The show is called The American Way, and she uses collage and assemblage to really talk about what American culture is, what the American dream is, and she does that by creating very beautiful compositions. So here I'd like to draw our attention up there. If you notice, these ceilings are really high, and that's because we had an auditorium in here, so we were able to keep the height. This is the first time that we have huge gallery walls, which is wonderful because we have a lot of really large-scale installations in our collection. So having the height to show art is really, really special to us. So I'll tell you a little bit about Alexis Smith's work, this piece here. This is an artwork of Marilyn Monroe. Obviously, right, she's very iconic. There are glasses, and then inside of this it says, "Men seldom make passes at girls who wear glasses." And that is a quote by Dorothy Parker, whom I love. One of my favorite quotes from her is, I'm not quoting it verbatim, but every day I wake up and I sharpen my tongue. I love that notion. I like to think I do the same. And so in this piece, we see football players making a pass. So there's like a football and he's about to pass it to this other person. And then we have this image of Marilyn Monroe. So she takes ideas that are in literature, ideas that are in popular culture, such as football, and ties it all together to create some sort of commentary about society. And what I love about her work is that it's not so much about what she thinks about culture, but what you as a visitor thinks about culture. So oftentimes she's not interested in relaying her message, but extracting yours. So now we are entering what we call our collection galleries. So when you think of the museum, think of it as a space that in the middle has special exhibitions, which is what we just saw right now with Alexis Smith. And around it, it's all works from our permanent collection, so almost in a U shape. The galleries are in a somewhat chronological order, and we begin with minimalist works and abstract works, and that's kind of what we're showcasing in the beginning. Here we have all of the great donors that contributed to this wonderful space. We're so grateful to them. And in a little bit, I'll show you an artwork that influenced the design here. If you notice, it is, it's written out names, and it was created by a sign painter from San Francisco. So I'll tell you a little bit more about this later, but it was hand drawn. So this is a gallery that showcases artists that are experimenting with design and with really pushing the boundaries of what art can be. I like talking about this piece. This is a very iconic piece created by Ellsworth. It is a piece that is very minimal in its language. There's a lot of subtracting of information. So what we see here is a red square, a blue shape, and then we have the green in the back. It is a piece that I think invites the viewer in, and it makes us slow down because it's so kind of simple in its language. And it's a piece that, if I'm being honest, for many, many weeks, I walked past it and kind of didn't give it the time of day. And one day I said, okay, Ellsworth, I'm gonna test you out. So I stood in front of it, as I'm doing now, and I just kind of hyper-focused on the color. And I realized that when you do that, the colors come to life. They're very vibrant, especially in this area here where there's the matchup of the green and the red. The colors almost kind of pulsate. And that is because Ellsworth was, first of all, very systematic in his approach to creating art. He planned everything out before he even did it, so going in, he knew what he would do. He oftentimes looked at things in the natural environment, so a swing set, or a playground, or a cone, or a shadow, or a bird wing, and would create an abstract interpretation of that, plan it out, so everything was very detailed. But where he explored very fully was the use of brushstroke and the use of color. So, and what's incredible is that when you see this, it's almost machine-like. It's hard to see the artist's hand because it's so meticulously painted, yet there is so much, even though it's simple, there's so much complexity in it. And the more you explore it and the more you kind of get close and move away, you realize how dynamic this piece is. Now I'm going to take you to a piece that has a lot more visual information, but is still very abstract in its nature and composition. So, this is an artwork by an artist named Nancy Graves. She is an artist that fuses art with science, and in this case, she looked at images from the moon, in particular an area where there's supposed to be a sea, which is called the Sea of Tranquility, as well as where the moon landing occurred. So she looked at these images and created her own imaginative interpretation of the moon. I love that because I myself love the moon, and I love this way of interpreting the moon in a way that's very abstract, but also very poetic and visually very complex. When I first saw this, I actually thought of nuclei and, kind of this micro way of viewing cells. But in many ways, it's the opposite, right? It's macro, right? It's looking at the moon, right, which is so far away from us. But what I love about this piece is, in many ways, she is using organic shapes, right? These little dots through pointillism, through the use of creating kind of points on the painting. But she's also creating lines with the points. She's creating squares. So she's creating a composition that has a dichotomy of different shapes. We're about to look at an artwork by an artist named Gilliam. And he is an artist who was working in the 1970s alongside the artists that are shown here. And if we notice, his work is also an abstract, but it's so different from what we've seen in these other paintings. The other paintings are fixed to the walls, whereas these are floating in space. And that is something that Sam Gilliam was really much interested in, was shifting the way art can be presented. And in this case, presenting works that really move, right? If I were to walk or run up and down, these pieces shift. And that's because they're hanging from a fishing wire. He was very much interested in the idea of movement. He was a big lover of jazz. And with jazz comes this movement in music, but also in the body. And these pieces are called Dance With Me. So it gives you this idea that, they're figures that you can dance with. So now we are entering what we call our light and space room. This room was made specifically for this art in mind. If you notice up here, we have a ceiling that has skylights and that has baffles that diffuse the light into the space. Light and space was an art movement that began in the 1960s through 70s with loosely associated artists working in Southern California. And the artists were very much interested in investigating light as an art medium and playing around with different types of plastics and different types of materials to explore light. I love that this is a Southern California movement because being from Southern California, I know what the light is like down here. It's very bright. There's this very bright yellow sunlight that always kind of hits us. Everything glistens here. And so it makes a lot of natural sense that the artist would be influenced by light, having lived in Southern California. So the artists, as I mentioned, are exploring different materials to explore the concept of light. In this one, we have Peter Alexander, and he is an artist who was also trained as an architect, so his works are very structural. And in this piece, we see a resin that is, manufactured, right? So it's very well created and designed. And we see from the bottom a darker orange that very gradually fades into the top of the ceiling. And that's what these artists are doing. I think that they're trying to trick us with the use of light to get us to almost have like an optical illusion moment, which happens very strongly in this piece. One of our lines here is art with a view. And that is very much about how we interpret art, right? Everyone comes at an artwork with different viewpoints, but it's literal for us too here. We have art with a view, we have this beautiful ocean to stare at, and that is something that the architect was very mindful of. She was very thoughtful in creating moments of pause where we could experience the outside space and position us where we are, which is in this beautiful location in front of the Pacific Ocean. So now we are entering a gallery that has artworks by artists that are working in the border region. A lot of them are working here in the San Diego, Tijuana region, but we have a few of them working on other parts of the border. The artists are experimenting with different materials, and they are making social commentary on that dynamic between U.S. and whatever countries on the other side. We do have a lot of dialogue happening between San Diego and Tijuana because of where we're located. I love to say that here in San Diego, our relationship to Tijuana is very much the relationship of twins attached to the hip. You can't have one story without the other. So there is, it's very much a part of our culture, and I love that this gallery is here because so many people from San Diego can relate and can, explore this connection very deeply through these artworks. This piece is by an artist named Felipe Almada. He was really big on promoting Tijuana border artists. In this work, we see a lot of different elements. We have an altar, we have Bart Simpson, popular culture, we have newspaper clippings, we have an array of different objects, we have objects that are made in factories, and there's a lot to dissect in this piece. And unlike the minimalist artists that we saw before, these artists are way more, I would say, in your face, and they're kind of poking at you more directly than with the subtle works that we saw in the other galleries. But here the artist is looking at that relationship between Tijuana and San Diego, what the border connection is, economic, cultural, and identity exchanges that occur within, among other things. And as you will see, all of our labels are translated in Spanish, and that's because we have a lot of Spanish speakers here, and we believe in being accessible through the language as well. Speaking of language, this is an artwork by an artist named Celia Alvarez Muñoz. She is an artist that lives in Texas and explores that Texas-Mexico relationship in her artwork. If you notice up here, we have street signs, and then we have an image of a postcard. And in this work, we see what would be just kind of a kind of average home. And these are the types of homes that she saw a lot growing up. A lot of her work explores childhood memory. And then we see these great street names that say El Paso, El Peso, Myrtle, Muertos, Mesa, Mesa. So she's playing off of the words and the way we pronounce things. And it's very interesting because if you are a Spanish speaker, when you see these words, you pronounce them the wrong way. And so what's really wonderful about this piece is that she was exploring this idea in the 1980s. And I love that nowadays we use Siri a lot. And when you use Siri, she does that a lot too, right? So for example, La Jolla, which is where we are, I as a Spanish speaker say La Jolla, and then Siri says La Jolla, right? So there are so many interesting ways of pronouncing words, and that says so much about language and the fusion of language. And that's what the artist is exploring here, even before, Siri, the time of Siri. This is also part of our renovated space. If you notice over here, we have this very beautiful floating staircase, which is stunning. And then, of course, views of the ocean. A lot of the artworks here are in the pop art realm, where artists were appropriating familiar ideas and looking at popular culture and exploring them through their art. Over here we have Andy Warhol, so we have big time hitters. Here we have Niki who was an artist that resided in San Diego in her later years. If you ever come visit San Diego, you'll probably see her work. She created a lot of public artworks for the city of San Diego. And in this one, she created this kind of mythical goddess figure, Ganesh, and like an elephant with a little mouse. I like to talk about this piece, which is by an artist named Baldessari. I like calling attention to him because he was from National City, which is here in San Diego. It's a really wonderful neighborhood, vibrant neighborhood down south. And if you notice here, we see terms most useful in describing creative work of art, and there are a lot of words. He's kind of poking fun at what I do and what I have done throughout this session, and I'm sure I've used like half of the words here. So it's kind of in many ways like comical and poking fun, but also being kind of a little critical of the art world. He's also exploring this idea of conceptual art and what art is and who the creator is. In this case, he hired a sign painter to create this piece. So he thought of the idea and had someone else produce it. Conceptual art is very much the idea that the concept is more important than the kind of the finished product. So in this case, we see that happening. This is kind of the end of our gallery spaces in the renovated part of the museum. Here we have an artwork by Charles Gain. The airplane starts descending as you see now. At some point you hear screams. This was created before 9/11, and it is something that is on loop. So it crashes, it goes back in place, it comes down, you hear the screams, crashes, so on and so forth. So what's the point, right? In this case, when you experience this artwork, you're seeing it, you hear the cries, you become a spectator of the tragedy. And so he's kind of drawing attention to us and how we consume tragedy. And I think a lot about the news, right? When we see the news, it's just the same tragedy over and over and over again, and we consume it and consume it. So it's a social commentary piece, I think, in which he questions us as spectators. We are now outside of the museum. We're on the back side of the museum. If you look over here, we have the Pacific Ocean. Again, not a bad place to work or visit. Above us, we have an artwork by an artist named Nancy Rubins. And obviously, we see canoes, we see boats, we see a whole bunch of objects that you would see out in the ocean exploding out of the building. They are reinforced by being connected through these wires, which were recently strengthened during the renovation. And it's a work that I think really defines us as an organization. So many people know of us through this artwork because of Coast Boulevard, which is right here where people drive by and see this work. So now we are at Robert Irwin's 1997 piece, 1 degree, 2 degree, 3 degree, 4 degrees. And what you see here are windows, tinted windows with cutouts that give us a view of the ocean. I love this piece. This is actually my favorite piece for a few different reasons. The first reason is because the concept is very simple, right? Tinted windows, a cutout, a window, an everyday idea that we see. It's an artwork in which not only can we see a distinction in color and it visually affects us, but it's also an artwork that we can feel. Right now you can feel the ocean breeze. It's an artwork that you can smell. It's very salty smelling in here because of the ocean. And it's an artwork that you can literally go through, right? So this is an artwork that is very simple, but yet it creates such a powerful impact for the viewer to experience. The artist, Robert Irwin, is a San Diego-based artist. He is now in his 90s. And it took him 3 years to find the right manufacturing company and the right glass in order to create a piece in which people would not get hurt, right, if they touch this, but also a piece that would not crack over time. This piece is by an artist named Yayoi Kusama and was given to us by Joan and Irwin Jacobs. It is a piece in which it's a giant pumpkin with polka dots on it, which is very signature of the artist's style. It's a piece that I love because children love this piece. They're just instantly gravitate towards it, and they want to touch it, and they see themselves in it. That's another thing, is that you can see your body through it. So it's kind of a very fun piece for us to have here in the entrance. It is called Dreaming Pumpkin, and I'll let you come to your own conclusions on what that means. The Hammering Man is one of 11 series of Hammering Man sculptures installed around the world. Ours is the hardest to keep up with because of the salty seawater. It corrodes the motor and requires repairs more so than other handyman sculptures. He is the smallest of the series, measuring up to 18 feet. You can see the hammering man working 4 times a minute, 15 hours a day, and 364 days a year. He cranks out an impressive 1.3 million hammer swings annually.
I'm Summer Padilla Elliott. I'm the lead visitor engagement ambassador at the front desk. So this one right here, this is a sculpture by Marcos Ramirez Erde. I believe he's based in Tijuana. So yeah, right here. And then the works that you saw, the smaller versions of this that were in the gift shop, I believe we only had about 5 or 10 of those made by the artist himself, just so we can sell them in our shop. Yeah, this hose like wraps around the whole garden. So you'll see it up on the terrace, you see it down here. People move it around, and when they do, we just take note of it and move it back. So this is Karen by Andy Goldsworthy, and what's really cool about this one is the individual stones are just placed together. So they're not screwed together, they're not drilled together, they're not glued together, they're just placed there. And so the structure itself keeps everything in place and from falling apart.